Good evening, councillors. The first item of business tonight is the election or the confirmation of Councillor Ward as chairman of this committee. Is that agreed? Thank you.
Right, thank you for the overwhelming confidence, ladies and gentlemen. Please feel free to take your jackets off if you wish. Item 2 is the appointment of Vice Chairman, Councillor Pat Frost. Is that agreed? Okay, quick health and safety before we get going. There are 3 big Fs tonight. Fire, we don't expect one, but that way is the normal way, but there is a fire exit there, which most of the staff will rush out, so please follow them. Phones, please turn them off or put them on silent. And football, if you are sneakily watching it, it is a hanging offence to tell the chairman what the score is, and a flogging offence to tell anybody else, so please keep your delight or otherwise to yourself.
So that means we can watch the football then, Chairman?
If the Wi-Fi is
I will not be circulating around the table to check on you like a schoolmaster. Apologies for minutes of the last meeting. Anybody got any difficulties with them, or may I sign them as correct? Thank you very much. Apologies for absence and substitutes.
Yes,
Emma.
we've got apologies for absence from Councillor Pat Frost and Brenda Greenslade, and we have Councillor Bob Upton as a substitute, and I've forgotten her name.
Gillian Martin.
Gillian Martin, who's come to speak and represent.
welcome aboard.
I'm a deputy's deputy, I believe.
Okay, we also have our permanent visitors in the far corner here, the Waverley Scrutiny Group. And we have, for those who haven't met them yet, Councillor David Beeman and Councillor Paul Fellows, who are keen to see how things are done.
Oh, indeed.
Okay, that's all right. Apology absence and substitute done. Declaration of interest, any?
None before the meeting.
Questions from members of the public, any?
None received.
Questions from members, any?
None received.
Right, so we're straight into item 8 on your agenda, which is being, well, I think practically the whole meeting is probably being done by Annalisa, but the floor is yours.
Okay. So this is the paper, the Housing Services response to the recommendations from the Waverley Scrutiny Group and the report they did on recharges. You may recall that the Scrutiny Group presented their report at the last meeting in March. They looked at whether the recharge policy was fit for purpose, looked at communications and the processes that we had in place. Following their investigation and deliberations, they came up with 14 recommendations for the housing service. All of those have been agreed by the housing team. I'm pleased to say that 8 of them have been completed already. Annex 1 gives you the list of 14 recommendations. So you can see that 8 have been completed, including reviewing the policy, which is at Annex 2. We've created a new accountancy code, so it's easier to report and identify where recharges have been made. And also we're encouraging tenants to take up insurance. The remaining 6 recommendations are work in progress, and we're hoping that those will be completed towards the end of the summer. Just to be clear, recharges, we are talking about the housing service charging a tenant when we've done work that they should have done, or when they've left their property in a poor state of repair and we've had to do repair work, we're then recharging the tenants. So the recommendations are to give thanks again to the amazing work of the Waverley Scrutiny Group, to support the action plan and the recommendations, and to receive an update in November where, all being well, we'll have completed all the recommendations and be able to give you some feedback about the amount and the number of recharges we've made and the amount of money we've collected.
Questions, comments from members of the committee? Was that prayer?
No.
Hand up, or?
Going into the football, Jim.
Are you content?
Which side?
In the corner there? Thank you very much. Okay, the recommendations I think you've read out to them already, so we'll move straight to recommendations, which are on an unnumbered page of my agenda. But item 8, are they agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are on to item 9, and guess what? Annalisa.
Okay. So this is an update on the work the Housing Service have done following the earlier Waverley Scrutiny report on voids. So 1 year on, the Waverley Scrutiny presented the report on voids to the Head of Housing in May 17. They looked at the cost of repairs, looked at value for money and the re-let standard that we have. So when I talk about a void, I'm not talking about a hole in the wall, I'm talking about a home that's become empty because one of our tenants has left and it's void until we put the new tenant in, and during that time we'll do some work to the property to make it better. The group gave us 10 recommendations, 8 of which were agreed. 1, we already had a process in place, and unfortunately we did some feasibility about recycling locks and we weren't able to take that recommendation forward. We've completed all of the 8 recommendations that were agreed. I believe the scrutiny group have been involved with that process, so I'm looking to close the action plan now, and again recommend that we give thanks again to the Waverley Scrutiny Group, and if there's any comments or suggestions to be passed on.
Councillors, members of the group, please.
Number 2 on the page 1, it says since April 2018, 28-day surveys have no longer been undertaken. And you put something else in place. Can you elaborate on what that is putting in place?
Yeah, we're looking to do online surveys to try and capture people.
Obviously, what about people who have got the internet?
As I say, we're looking at the online process, but we potentially, if we don't get a fair sample back, then we would do some more telephone surveys.
Okay. So there's only sort of contact sort of 4 and 7 months then for an introductory tenant, nothing before that then sort of thing?
Yes, yeah, we're looking to try and make sure that we have got some contact. I think what we need to do is make sure that we record every contact we have with a tenant. We don't want a new tenant to wait for us to call them to see if there's a problem. We should be empowering them at the sign up that they contact us. So another way to think of this is for us to monitor the number of contacts we've had from new tenants in the first month that they've been with us, and then we know that they're settled, they've moved in and everything. So.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Are you content in the corner? Thank you. Can I say that those recommendations are agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 10, tenant involvement progress reports. Do I need to introduce you?
Just give me a minute to press the right button.
Okay.
Tenant involvement progress reports. Most of you have hopefully met Jeanette Arnold before, who is our wonderful tenant involvement officer. So this report is to give you an update on the work we've completed in the last year and the work we're looking to complete this year. Those of you who were at the 6 o'clock meeting will have picked up that at the conference it was really recognised that tenant involvement is central and tenants should be listened to improve your services and to give a good quality service. So here at Waverley we've got a range of ways for people to get involved. We've got some high level ways to get involved, such as our tenants panel members who are involved on a strategic and operational level. We've got the scrutiny group who are our critical friend when looking at our processes and identifying areas of weakness. We have designated persons complaints panel who look to resolve complaints locally when a tenant's gone through the Waverley process. And we also have focus groups and survey residents to get their views as well. So we also offer support and training to our volunteers. Once we've got somebody who's shown an active interest, we don't like to let them go. So hopefully you'll agree that you've had support and training from us. And within the report we've got some highlights of what the groups have done, but you'll have seen that through the course of this year when the reports we've brought in. And looking forward to 2018-19, last year we did a tenant satisfaction survey which is called STAR, And from that, we had some issues that we want to delve a little bit further into about people's view and satisfaction on the quality of their home. So we've got some summer events coming up over August in each of the 4 areas to invite tenants to come and talk to us about some things. The head of service, head of housing operations, Hugh, and portfolio holder for housing are meeting with the whole of the tenants panel bi-monthly this year. Last year they met the tenants panel chair and vice chair. I think it was welcome thought to increase that to all tenants panel members. We're also looking to extend our network with other social housing providers, see what other people are doing, and also we do some really fantastic work and we do it really quietly, so I'm really pushing for us to look to get some kind of award or recognition through the social housing world to show what good work we've been doing. So, shall I move on to recommendations, or is there any questions?
Well, we'll let them the opportunity, shall we?
Yes.
Tony.
When I had something to do with this, I found a very happy group, actually. Are you still short of volunteers?
We are always looking for volunteers.
Can we do something as a group to get you sort of flagged up so people know that if they,
Promotion,
yeah,
Yeah.
or anything like that?
Any time you're talking to any of our residents or you're at an event where tenants may be, just keep publicising that we do want to hear from people. There are a range of ways to get involved. We have a tenant involvement strategy. You may remember we talk about acorns and oak trees, so there's little ways to get involved, and then there's the ways Adrian and the scrutiny group get involved with their branches touching everything. So yeah, we're always looking to get people involved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, comments, any more? Recommendations are, well, I'll read them out for this time. It's recommended Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee notes the tenant involvement achievements and supports the actions 2018-19 and acknowledges and thanks those tenants who volunteer for the housing service, whose efforts are greatly appreciated. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We're on to item 11. I think we might have a change of voice for this one.
Really, I'd just like to give apologies for Lee Horden, who was going to do this presentation. She was our interim consultant asset manager and has looked at where we are with our asset management. But I'm afraid she is not well, was unable to attend tonight. So the presentation is from her kind of point of view, her scrutiny of what we're doing around asset management. One of the things, and talking to Councillor King, we've been very limited on our strategic thinking on asset management, what we can do with our assets going forward in terms of supporting tenants and their aspirations. And I want to talk about tenants' aspirations later on. So one of the restructures, one of the reasons behind the restructure last year was about splitting asset management so it could focus on asset management, and then the other half of the property services would focus on the delivery, customer service, delivering the service immediately in terms of timescales that customers expect, and to just give a little bit more thinking. There's a bit of delay in the recruitment, so I brought Lee in to start the process up, and she's done, I hope you agree, a tremendous job in her report. And then we have recruited to the post, and again, Paul has had to give 3 months' notice, and he's not going to be starting until August. So this presentation covers items 11 and 12, but I do want to just touch on item 13 because I think there is some link between the two papers. The paper on housing design for new council housing. And really there's some themes of Annalise's presentation in the informal meeting, and I think it's about now starting to think what we want to achieve through our housing asset. The last 5 years, the journeys we've been on is about improving the customer journey, the service delivery. I think we can now think perhaps a little bit more strategically about what we want to do with the assets. And I think the question that Annalise asked is why we've got a council housing service and how we can take that forward. I think the thing we need to always remember when we're talking about asset management and our assets, it's comes from the rent that funds it. So basically the formula is our rents minus our management cost is the surplus, which is what we use to reinvest, plan maintenance and the new build. And I see one of my key jobs is about trying to manage and reduce that management cost as low as possible, so we have that surplus to reinvest in our properties and do new build. As I say, it's something that's so important that we do deliver good services, but we do it efficiently and effectively. I think it's also to recognise here that there is a tension between reinvestment in our current stock and the new build. And that's something that we again, I think, as we go forward, we've got to discuss is where the priorities are in terms of that limited pool of money. And that pool of money has been reduced over time, which we're going to talk about. The asset management, what is asset management? It is more than about the bricks and mortar and about upkeeping. Of course, that is important and effective business planning, but it's also looking at what we want to achieve through our homes. Where do we need to improve them to actually meet the aspirations, the needs of our tenants, and how can we do that in a productive and efficient way that, as I say, we've got a small, a limited amount of money, and how we can use that effectively going forward. So we had a strategy which came to this committee in 2015. It was agreed by this committee and was looked in, if I recall, in quite depth. There was great political change in terms of policy that affected the strategy, and that was the reduction in rents by the 1% over 4 years. This had a tremendous impact on our business plan, as we've explained before. So it wasn't just those 1%. We were actually, in our business plan, we're expecting rent rises in line with inflation. And also, so the cumulative effect is that we lose that increase and that for as long as the business plan goes on. And so the Director of Finance estimated the total cost over 30 years of just those 4 years rent reduction was £300 million. As I said, there was a lot of focus on, in the last couple of years, on the performance of our key contractors, which we've shared that with the committee, and focus on day-to-day services and the need to procure the services going forward. And again, that was the trigger of the restructure that I previously discussed. The other thing that we've had is the STAR survey. That's the satisfaction survey of our residents, and again, we found that the satisfaction hasn't improved, and Lee's confirmed that within her document. Also, what Lee did was went through all the comments of tenants and what they felt about their homes, and a lot of the comments was about the outside of their homes, and Lee calls it the curb appeal of their homes. And again, that is something we haven't focused on, we haven't prioritised, and again, that's something we need to think going forward. So on page 51, as I said, the asset management strategy had a number of strategic objectives, and those are the ones I'm just going to focus on tonight. I'm going to focus on the ones that were either amber or red. Just one of the positive ones in the middle there was the void properties, which this committee has really focused on, the achievements we've made. We've literally saved hundreds of thousands of pounds, not only in rent loss, in savings in that area, but in terms of council tax paid on empty properties. Again, is running into hundreds of thousands of pounds that this group has saved and helped to save. But going on to the things that Lee has marked as either partial or not achieved. And one of the things that she highlighted in the document was about, and this is the first top one, about meeting tenant aspirations. And again, we clearly we had to reduce our capital maintenance programme. It was basically halved, and we prioritised the envelope of the properties. So we haven't actually focused on what aspirations are. And that was one of the things that when we met with the tenants panel this week, is what were tenants' aspirations. So we put this statement in there without exploring what tenants' aspirations are. And a lot of aspirations, I'm assuming, because national surveys still demonstrate that home ownership is still an aspiration of residents. And it might be something that we need to look at, is in terms of, it seems most of us don't like the idea of right to buy, and we lost 52 properties under the right to buy in the last 3 years. 52 properties, so that's not only the asset, it's that rent for the next 30 years that we had in our business plan. That can we use our assets, our power there to actually help tenants meet that aspiration if they've got that home ownership, but we don't lose our asset. And there's a number of different models which can be used. We can start to use shared ownership, equity, loans, and that kind of issue. So it might be something we need to focus on going forward. But in terms of satisfaction, as I mentioned, the STAR survey said there wasn't any particular great increase in people's satisfaction about the level of their home, the upkeep of their home. Housing stock surveys, we've got a partial, but again the restructure changed that, but we've got someone focusing purely on doing stock condition surveys, so that should be going forward. Then the red was the energy efficiency, and that was something we haven't really progressed. I mean, we've progressed in some, you could say in some areas, and that's what I said to Lee. We've done boiler replacements, we've done huge programs of domestic boilers in the shelter schemes as well. We've done window replacements. In the senior living schemes, we've also done low energy lighting. However, we've not used the data, and the data, the kind of way it's used in Councillor Seaborn's report, we haven't really focused on that area, and that's why that was given a red. Garages we've been very slow on, but that's been picked up again in the restructure. We've got an officer to just look at the garages. That's a potential revenue of £500,000. We're clearly not collecting that amount, so we've got a programme of refurbishment, and then there's also areas of demolishing and rebuilding, and Louisa's team is picking that up. So I think by the end of this strategy period, that would be agreed. And then the other issue is partial was around health and safety, and we gave some commitments around slips and trips within homes, and again very little work has been done around that area. I think we've done an enormous amount of work around health and safety generally within our schemes. We've got asbestos reports on all our homes. We've done all the work around proper processes for asbestos, Legionella control, etc. But what Lee found was that there's something called the Housing Health and Safety Rating System, and one of the things, and Adrian picked this up because from his experience of going to people's homes. So it's things like WCs should have a wash hand basin. So many of our WCs, the separate WCs, haven't got a wash hand basin in them. So there's that kind of work that probably would not cost particularly a lot of money, that we can actually clear a lot of these smaller items. So and we probably need to do some work about slips and falls. So again, Lee does some real detail about achievements, and I think there's some fantastic achievements in the annex, but then she also highlights the things the to-do list as well, so there's still plenty of work to be done. So this is just, I suppose, me and Lee throwing this out, is what should we focus going forward, because this strategy lasts until March 2020. But we need to start thinking about the new strategy from 2020, and we probably need to do that well before the budget's set in. So we probably need to finalise it by September 19 for it to affect the budgets going forward. So we've got tenant satisfaction, and it's about what level. And I think when we had this debate with the tenants panel, I think Adrian, you thought the 79% was okay. I don't want to put words in your mouth. All I'm just trying to say.
Obviously, it can be better. Obviously, it seems reasonable. But 50% work.
And what level do we want to aspire to as a council? And are there other things that we want to aspire to? Is in terms of lower cost housing. So we had a debate: we should be providing, for better word, Ryanair kind of standard, very basic housing for the cheapest possible rent that we can give people, so they're able to save their deposit to buy a new home. So we are literally that step up for people to step up. I mean, we have got the flexible tenancy policy, which is in theory the idea that people are there for 5 years and hopefully they can progress and move on. But if we're charging affordable rents for flexible tenancies, there's no chance people are going to be able to save a deposit. So there's a bit of a conflict in that in our two policies there: flexible tenancies and affordable rents. We've talked about tenants' aspirations, and again, what does that mean in terms of their home? And does that mean a bit more than just having a decent home? It's about home ownership, having a bit of ownership within there. Is it about transforming lives, and how do we measure that? And I thought that one of the interesting things and I think we'll come back to it, in Councillor Seaborn's report, is we do try to measure, have we transformed people's lives with the new build. I think there's a low, there's a short sample here of people have been asked the question, but I think there's some good questions, so perhaps we should intensify more in terms of asking more people these questions that are asked on that page, and that's on page 103, but I'm going to come back to that. We've got still the decent home standard, which to some extent we've put aside in terms of kitchens and bathrooms. Do we go back to really driving kitchens and bathrooms? As I said, we picked up from the STAR survey, there's the curb appeal. Do we need to do more on the outside of our homes? Parking in garages, again, that is a lot of our complaints is around parking in garages and issues. We talked about energy efficiency. Should that be, the standard that we're setting in new homes, should be that be the standard we should set in our own homes, the current homes. And it's about, also the other thing is about flexibility and about allowing people flexibility for employment reasons to actually be able to move around and to get employment. And do we have to put that in there? And then they say there could be other things. I mean, the driver could be just to get down the housing register. And do we just, the numbers on the housing register, and is that could be our driver. And there's a whole heap of things that we could do around that. And that's not just about building new homes. It's about effectively managing our stock and effectively talking to people. Why do they want to move? Why on their housing register? I mean, last year we 40% of our voids, our empty properties, were due to internal transfers. So I'd say it's something that me and Annalisa think is not quite right. There's something, could we have done, be managing our stock more efficiently? And that's where the wider aspect of asset management comes in. So there is some further work that we need to do, I think, as a group to think about this, that will feed in to the new asset management strategy. So what I thought was to highlight and to help that conversation, I know it's only a small sample, but this suggests the questions I think we have to ask, and this is Lee asking this question, but these new builds, we don't, from this stats and the information here, are we transforming lives enough through our new builds? Should we be looking to do more? And again, it goes back to the point, satisfaction levels, and again, there's a lot of data about satisfaction levels. Some areas, they're low in the new build, as they are low in the current stock. There's some things that we seem to, in the new build, get right. I think, remember, bathrooms, was 100%, and the condition of the outside was 100% for the new homes. So there does seem to be, and there's other areas though, storage, seems to be quite low satisfaction levels. But all I'm just highlighting, I thought was really good sort of contrast in highlighting us going forward. We need to, I think both areas need to start asking the sort of similar questions of residents to get a feel of where we need to go forward. And it's this involvement, with tenant involvement, and I think it's the kind of work that Adrian's done in the past to help get that information from residents and tenants. So the way forward is all the things I've said, is about prioritising investment in the future, closing, from Lee's perception, there's a gap between the new build housing standard and our current standard for our current stock. Are we making the real impact that we want to make, that we should be making? Are we meeting aspirations? Should we be meeting aspirations? Is that what we've got the housing stock for? Again, talking about greater understanding of tenant feedback. What can we do? Do we need to make that focus our investment decisions? And of course, we need to continue to improve the way we manage our health and safety risks and ensure that's a priority going forward. We've got our current strategy. We've highlighted a huge amount of work that we've actually done. Still plenty of aspirations and pledges that we put in there that we've got to continue working on, and we will. And I thought, Lee highlights some of the stuff that we probably won't achieve. We've got a plan for the next strategy. I think Lee's given us some ideas of what we need to start thinking about going towards 2020. And what's going to help us with Mentor is the new strategic asset manager, who will give us more focus in our approach and monitoring the delivery of the commitments that we've made. Thank you.
Thank you. It's quite difficult criticising yourself, isn't it? Councillors, Tony.
Thank you. Just one little word sort of popped out. Page dampness.
Yes.
Page 52. Is this due to condensation? Can it be cured by better design? Are we really at this, in the 21st century, having people living in damp houses? I think this is not a good score.
No, and I mean I haven't, because it's such a large document, focused on everything, but that is something that that Lee has highlighted we haven't done enough work on. It can be caused by a huge number of things, or a combination of things, which is usually, we've talked about poverty before, fuel poverty. We haven't insulated our homes as we should have, or that we made a commitment to do. So the dampness is caused by condensation, which is caused by poor insulation, which could be caused by poor heating, which could be caused by poverty and lack of money, or poor heating systems. So what we're actually writing the process now is to make sure that we go into people's homes and actually assess all of those issues and have actually come up with a solution to try and remedy that problem.
I mean, it can be done by education. Some people just simply don't know that closing all the windows is actually not the best thing to do.
But one thing that totally drives me mad and drives tenants mad is when people say it's life. A surveyor walks in and says it's your lifestyle. It's a combination of things. The tenants have to help improve the situation, no doubt. But it's about us as a landlord working with the tenant to solve that problem. So there's, and as I say, there's the bigger structural issues, and that's why we're doing all the work on Oxford Bridge, because we know that that's why we've demolished the properties, because we just know we could never insulate them cost effectively, and that's why in the end we have to knock down houses, and that's one of the things in an asset management strategy, identifying properties that you have to demolish and rebuild, because they are going to come to the end of their house, end of their life. But don't forget, because we've got 800 plus properties that were built before 1945. So the standards are a lot lower, etc. So we have either disposed of properties, or as you say, on Oxford Bridge, we are actually having to rebuild them. So there is no one answer, and when a surveyor goes into a tenant's home, it's not to just have one answer. It's your lifestyle. They've got to look at the whole picture, because again, it could be simple things like guttering. The guttering's not right, and the rainwater's running down the walls of the house. Yeah. So it's a councillor. It's a simple solution sometimes, but it can be complex, and it can usually be a combination of things. And what we need is a clear strategy for tackling it.
Thank you.
Councillor Coburn and then Councillor Goodrich.
Sorry, mine was much broader. I mean, thank you very much for something that's clear, focused, I can understand, which is, and there's a couple of comments. One, it always strikes me as terribly short term. 5 year for a strategy. I just don't understand how you can have a strategy in 5 years.
Okay.
I'd only be starting it. You know what I mean? I mean, to me, it should be much, much longer.
Okay.
You know what the system is. You know what you've got, and to make it quite short. But then, maybe that's the feature of the council. But you've got a manager coming in, and maybe they'll do a slightly longer one. But certainly, we should. I mean, 20 is nearly here. Let's face it. Races by. But I can't answer your questions, by the way, as to what you should focus on. But I think you're asking the right questions, which is the start, isn't it? And with the help of the tenants, you can get there. I was just intrigued, actually, going back to your colourful pages. that you've given yourself achieved, I don't mean you have,
Mm.
for Strive to continually add value to its assets. Surely that's not achieved. I mean, surely that's continuing.
Well, to continue, I
You know,
think.
it's not an objective that's been achieved because
I suppose
you know. Sorry.
Yeah, so I assume it's a snapshot at that time. There was let's say Lee's come in and audited where we are. I suppose at that snapshot, she's found examples of where we had demonstrated we've added value to our assets. But it is an ongoing. It's definitely an ongoing. So we're not stopping doing it.
If it's achieved, you've finished it.
Yeah, no, we haven't
That's what-
finished. We haven't finished.
And you do the same in the other one with the continuous strategic regeneration of Upland Ridge and identify other suitable areas for improvement. We can't have achieved that because I can name a few,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm not in your position. So I was just intrigued with really the sort of wording of a strategy. You know, I mean, the strategy has to be an action that can be delivered. Otherwise, you know, it's not going to sort of work. But I'm not really criticising.
No.
I think it's a really good piece of work, and I think the housing department, I've never known it quite so focused and vibrant. It's absolutely wonderful. So really nothing.
But thank you very much.
Mr. Goodrich?
Yes, I mean, I had well, firstly to say, good report, and it's good to headline all the successes in Annex 1 as well. But it was a serious supplemental on the dampness. I mean, how big a problem is it? What sort of percentage of our housing stock has dampness? Do we have an idea? Are we talking about a few dozen, or are we talking about 100? I mean, just to give a feel of.
I think it's literally a handful every time. I mean, what we don't have is proper data. So all I'm getting the feel of is the complaints that we probably receive when it becomes uncontrollable in terms of mould. I wouldn't really like to answer that, and that's probably one of our problems. We haven't got a real feel of what the problem is. And we need, and that's why I'm setting up the system to actually collect. Every time there's a report of dampness, it's collected, and we actually know the extent of the problem. So apologies, it's not worth me guessing, but we're not inundated. I mean, from my experience in previous places, you know an estate and it's just full of damp. It's not like it's that odd problem. Yeah.
So it's more likely to be a different problem from the place just down the road.
Yeah.
Because of gutter or something.
That's right.
Rather than inherit the whole lot.
I don't think. We haven't got an estate that's inherent with dampness.
So that's what I was really on.
Yeah. No.
Thank you.
Councillor Townsend and then Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you. I just wanted to say again, you know, a really good report, and I think obviously as a team you're setting yourselves higher expectations, so that's a really good thing. I did notice with the housing stock and your the surveys. So I presume the surveys that the 5 per day, you're aiming for 6 per day, are to identify problems then before they become a big problem, like a leaking gutter, which could be leaking for months, hopefully, or years, would be identified earlier and save money in the long run. I presume that's the kind of thing, is it, or is it not doing things like that?
The key role is to actually look at the property and actually make an assessment of the key components and give them an estimated life on how long they will be. Then that gets fed into what is our keystone, which is our IT for our asset management, and then that just helps to build the long-term programs. So it may be very rarely that the surveyor is looking for individual repairs particularly. He's looking at the major components.
So would he not be able to identify like the odd repair? That
he would, yeah.
Yes.
But his key role going in is to look at the overall components of the property and guess and estimate of the life and when they would need to be replaced.
Yes. I mean as the obviously one of the key things is to provide a roof over someone's head, isn't it? And that's the main aim of, I presume, your housing department.
Yeah.
And also meeting the aspirations of our tenants will be an ongoing ongoing thing, and also the expectations of someone living in a very old house may be different from someone living in one of the new properties. So it's difficult to marry all those up. But
exactly, and there's people at different stages of their life, and perhaps an older person in a sheltered house, senior living house, it's got a different aspiration. So there's not going to be one aspiration, and it's about trying to meet those. And again, is the word aspiration too challenging for us to actually deliver? It's about satisfaction, and to then perhaps go to that level.
So you said earlier, we spoke about the actual demographic in the housing stock and who your tenants are. So it's a growing elderly tenant. So and at the bottom end, are you getting any growing at a certain age and then levelling off? What is the demographic like?
I suppose as we re-let properties, there's a sort of a new generation coming in, but it is a lot slower than the people that are the older people. So I mean, the report highlights how we've tried to again manage our stock in trying to incentivise people to actually move, downsize, move to our shelter schemes. I mean, I think to some extent we've been very successful in that. In that it's usually 100% occupation. I mean, when we started, it was there was quite levels of voids in the properties. So we've been successful in moving people through, and I think it's probably one of the questions should be is what is the age of people on the housing register, and how can we meet their aspirations or their need, and then it's about moving people through the stock. I know it's people's homes, but it's also an asset that could be more useful in the needs of a younger family. So again, on the top of my head, I don't know the demographics top of my head, no. But I thought we can circulate those out, because we got those from the STAR survey, was quite accurate reflection. Because one of the things that I do remember from the STAR survey, what the consultant said, was the response will match our demographics in terms of the age response to the report. So we are getting a feedback from all of our community and all ages in our community.
Thank you.
But I'll circulate the age demographics.
Yeah, in the past I've done a presentation kind of who lives in a house like this, kind of just giving you the average Waverley tenant, so that's something we could have a look at.
And to see how that's perhaps changed over time would be really interesting.
Councillor Seaborn, then Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. Great to see all the Greens. Well done, team. It's good to see all of that. I've got a couple of comments which hopefully address the desire to see this strategy through and then work out what we might be able to do. The last point on the 5-year action plan, review effectiveness of estate inspections and walkabouts. I've asked about this before, and I'd ask it again. If you're going to do something there, can members be involved? We're out on the ground all the time, but we don't see things necessarily through the eyes of the officers. But if we could, then it would be a very useful tool. So I think that might be helpful, and something that can be addressed quite quickly. That's point one. The other point was that I was invited by this committee to sit on a value for money working group on capital projects and effectiveness of expenditure. In the annex to this, we've got some very long lists. They're not prioritised. One of the points that came out of that value for money review was that actually we were quite good at having long lists of things, but it's good to have a hopper of opportunities ranked and ready to go should the challenges that we've got here, shortage of funds or needing a little bit more work, something prioritised so that when the opportunity arises, if something does crop up over the next year, we're ready to go, because we've had chances. It's not all capital expenditure here, but we've had those chances with capital expenditure, and we haven't been ready to go, and the opportunity's been missed. But beyond that, it's great to see all those Greens. Thank you, Jim.
Councillor Burns?
Thank you. Very briefly, back to the dampness problem. At the Task and Finish group, we did actually look at results of a survey, and it would appear from that people living in flats have a small kitchen without the ability to have perhaps a tumble dryer or able to run one because they're hugely expensive, but also that we were perhaps housing some of our younger people with young families who had damp clothes to dry, and that created a problem of dampness within the properties, which people did find very, very distressing. So I think it's something we can be looking at. It's true.
Any more comments, questions? I really like the idea of the walkabouts with officers. Those who've been around a bit longer than me keep slipping me notes saying, could we do this a little bit more regularly? And we used to do it in the olden days, and it's probably one of the olden day things that actually is perhaps worthwhile having a look at and increasing. So if we could have some thoughts about that, that would be really useful. If there are no more comments, the recommendation for item 11 is that the Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee is asked to review progress against strategic objectives, which we seem to have done, the strategic 5-year plan actions within the management objective. So I hope that recommendation is acceptable.
Agreed.
And moving on to item 12, because they were both covered in the same presentation, the Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee is asked to endorse the proposed scope of the new HRA asset management strategy, and the committee is invited to consider how it wishes to be involved in the development of the new strategy. Well, we've had one point already. Are there any other points that people want to raise before I put that recommendation? Councillor Seaborn.
Yes, thanks, Chairman. So as for all the fun we had working on the new build design, one thing that was covered loud and clear in that Annalisa talked to during her informal presentation earlier, but isn't really stressed in this draft strategy, is the technology and advances in architecture and building standards. And I actually think it is probably worthy of being one of the bullets on page 60 at the top. I can't help thinking that our tenants are going to be chasing us in 5 or 6 years' time to retrofit electric car charging points. We saw from the housing design work that actually the loft space has potential for use, and at the moment we've got a lot of space that we're not using. It's an opportunity. It's an example. I'm not advocating that. I'm just putting it forward as an example. But I think it would be really strong, particularly in the light of what Annalisa said, the themes from that conference, that looking where the world's going as we do this strategy, so we're not playing catch up, we're actually leading the field, would be really good. And the other question was, how can we get involved? Well, one thing I note about this is it's incredibly complex, and there's a short time fuse because there's an election coming up, so we need to either design it around the election or have it out of the way before the election. But it seems to me that it would be very valuable to get members involved. We've got a huge amount of benefit out of being involved in the housing design strategy, and I suspect this is going to have to, because of the complexity, may well have to split into several groups because there are different themes. So seeing a timeline for this and then shoehorning those different themes into it, I think would be good. But I certainly fully support the notion of us being involved. I think we can add some value there. Thank you, Chairman.
Any other comments? Are those recommendations then agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We're now on to item 13, housing design studies, and it is Councillor Seaborn is going to start and then hand the work over to the workers.
Exactly. You'll be relieved to know I'm not going to say very much. You've been given a long report because it was essential to fully document what the task group considered and how it reached its conclusions and recommendations therein. But I don't imagine for a minute that everyone's read the report cover to cover. As long as you've had a look at the first few pages, hopefully you've got the gist of it and can ask questions on the basis of that. Because of the amount of work that Louise has been required to do with managing the Oxford Rig project, we're not quite there with having a final standards document, but it's progressing nicely and it will honour what's in our report. So I'm confident that we've done the work behind what needs to be produced. There's one outstanding item that's covered in the report that Louisa will talk to in a moment, but that's we wanted to set ourselves a standard for CO2 emissions and reduction, and we realised when we got towards the end of the work that we've been following London because London set a high standard, but London's work was based on emissions trading, which we're not going to get involved in. So that's being re-looked at, and Louisa will tell you where we're at with that. That we want to set ourselves an improvement target, but it has to be a realistic one. That was the theme all the way through this piece of work, coming up with ways of improving our stock without reducing the amount we can build, because it's going to cost too much. I believe the new standards will incorporate all the changes in regulation that have been enacted since the current version was written, and that includes the material that's come out of the Grenfell Tower work so far. Beyond that, I commend the report to you, and I certainly thank the members of the task group and the officers that put so much effort into providing evidence, discussing issues in detail, and generally striving to make sure that the next generation of Waverley's social housing is even better than what we're building now, which is pretty good. And I think we're all excited to watch these new standards being implemented in the building of Oxford Bridge Phase C. I'm hoping that project will be the legacy of a period of hard work and collaboration by members and officers. So that's really all I want to say, but I invite all the other members of the task group to chip in if they've got things to add.
Can I just add to that? We were very conscious that what we're designing now will last a few years, and we've built in buildings that will allow people who become elderly and disabled or need wheelchairs and all that are in properties that can easily be adapted now. And this is a big step forward, and I think Waverley is trying to be dementia friendly across. We're also elderly friendly, which is rather nice, and we ought to make more of that in our more general literature, saying that we think of the whole lifespan.
Please.
I just wanted to add as well what a very positive experience it was working together, and how heartening. You spoke earlier about it being our heart and soul or something job. It definitely came across like that.
It is, isn't it?
And I think we were trying to build homes whilst being very, very aware of costs as well, but trying to build homes that would, as Tony said, sort of stand the test of time as far as we could. And I think that hopefully what you will see will be something that will be on Oxford Ridge, hopefully, if we can get the planners maybe to take on board some of our ideas as well, will be something very positive, and hopefully somewhere that people really enjoy living.
I endorse everything that's been said about the committee and the group, the Task and Finish group. It was hugely interesting. I learned a lot. I know it's not about me, but I really do think that the document that's before you will stand the test of time. It shows just the enthusiasm from the chairman, and particularly from the officers, who were wonderful throughout.
They were very helpful.
They were. And I think
all of them.
But I think as well, for overview and scrutiny, this was a wonderful opportunity, and I think that it's really well done. I know I contributed a small part, but I think as a team we worked together, and I'm sure that the tenants and the future tenants of Waverley Borough Council will benefit hugely from the report and work. Thank you.
If you want to pick up the,
I'll just pick
hot
up the
potato he lobbed across the table.
Now this was about improving the dwelling emission rate and the general insulation and therefore energy efficiency of our new build properties. And so we put in recommendations and aspiration to achieve a 35% in uplift from the building regulations 2013 Part L. I've commissioned the architect that assisted us with information on passive house and former code and building regulations to provide a cost analysis on achieving that 35% improvement. I've had a discussion with them briefly today about the energy efficiency ratings and how without transfer off-site we would have to achieve that 35%, and there is some potential discussion about using renewables. So when we've got that cost analysis, we need to have a discussion with colleagues in housing and property services and yourselves about whether that's something we want to invest in, or whether we want to achieve about a 20% uplift without those renewables. So the analysis will determine really, I think, where we go with this. But there's definitely an aspiration to uplift from the standard building regulation requirement. And we're doing that already in our new building in the former code, which is 19% uplift. So I think if we can at least achieve what we're achieving now, that's positive. But that information and that work is underway at the moment. It's not available to share at present, but we'll have a discussion and draw that into the policy document at the end. I'd just also like to comment on the survey, just to flag that whilst there were some very positive elements on that Hugh flagged, I think, which I got flagged, but the data was very small sample, and also was surveys were issued to tenants in properties that had been designed and under construction before our original design standards have been implemented. So some of the results with regard to storage have slightly skewed the results. So going forward, the Hazard Development Strategy Enabling Team will be issuing these surveys on a more regular basis to new build tenants. I'm hoping in discussion with the Tenants and Estates team to try and build in some more immediate feedback through their visits to the tenants, so we can gain that data early. That's it. Thanks.
Yes, we have this weird dichotomy, don't we? We're all trying to cut down on CO2 like fury, and now there's a nationwide CO2 shortage. So, which seems a bit silly. But I mean, the interesting thing, and I think the thing to stress with a few comments that remain here, is this survey, this piece of work, grew out of a site visit with officers and councillors walking around the site together and suddenly saying, that's something to look at. So really the idea of officers and councillors walking the streets, basically, yes, in the nicest possible way, together really was borne out by this, because something really grew out of it. I think it's been a fantastic piece of work, and Richard has paid tribute to everybody except himself, so let me do so. I think it's been a brilliantly chaired and brilliantly attended session, and I think the officers have been absolutely fantastic. This is just the sort of thing I think Overview and Scrutiny Committee should be doing, and I look forward to the final thing with all the bells and whistles on, because I think it's been amazing.
And we did look in lofts for you, John.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. That was terribly kind of you. Any other comments before I put the recommendations to the committee? The recommendation you have before you is for the Housing Overview Scrutiny Committee to note the review undertaken by the working group, consider the report and endorse the recommendations contained therein. And they, if you haven't spotted them, are on page 75 of your group, which is recommending things to the portfolio holder for housing, who I'm sure is going to be extremely receptive. Absolutely. So, is that recommendation accepted?
Agreed.
Thank you, members of the committee. We're now on to item 4, performance management report, which is Annalisa again.
Yes, so agenda item 14, this is your routine performance management report. So the way the committee works, this is the quarter-report report, the end of year report for period 2017-18. So we have 9 indicators that we report to the committee. 7 out of the 9 of them were on target. However, I always include a little bit of extra information about relet speed wall, because I know it's a topic close to your hearts. So the 2 indicators we did make this year was the proportion of rent collected. And this has been an indicator that we've talked about every time I've brought this report to you. We had the anomaly with the water charge, but I've given you some contextual information. It's good to see that during 2016-17 we were running at just over 1% rent arrears, but during the last financial year we were running at just under 1% rent arrears. We have, if you do a bit of rounding up, about £600,000 in credit on people's rent accounts at the end of the year, and only £225,000 of arrears. So we are more than balanced. So please don't be alarmed by the fact that that indicator was up. We'll be looking at that again next year. And the other indicator that was off target was the repairs right first time, and unfortunately this is due to the extreme weather we had. If you remember back to those snowy, cold days we had, I know it seems a bit strange today to think about that. But it did have an impact on the service as we were trying to get to people who needed emergency responses rather than the appointment that they'd been scheduled for. But that's something we've worked with our contractors with, and performance has continued to improve after that blip in the service. The other information within the performance report is about complaints. So it's nice to see that all the hard work we've been putting in and the support that you've given us over the last year has resulted in an overall reduction in the number of complaints that the service has received this year. And finally, our colleagues in Housing Strategy and Enabling have been looking at new indicators that they'd like the committee to consider. So at the moment we report on the number of new affordable homes that have been built. Obviously they can be a little time in the coming, so what we'd like to be able to show you present to you is the number of homes that have got planning permission and the number of new affordable homes that have started on site, and then they will end up being the ones that are delivered. But you can see then that you've got a stream of affordable homes coming through, rather than just, you know, once every 6 months me saying, oh, we've got 20 new homes. So, and you'll see that those are coming along. And also you'll remember that Mike Rivers has given you a presentation about the changes in the homelessness legislation. So for us to report effectively to you, we just need to have a little change in the wording about the Homelessness Reduction Act. So the number of cases that we've prevented homelessness and discharged our duty with under the Homelessness Prevention Act. So those were the amendments we'd like to make to the report in the future.
Councillors, any observations or recommendations other than what we've achieved, what we've heard already?
Could I just ask one small thing, Lisa? I'm really great that you're going to provide those numbers, because that was going to be my question for the affordable housing.
Yeah.
Will you be able to then set a target? Because under Local Plan Part 1 we have kind of got a target, haven't we, for how many houses, and with the affordable portion, will there be a target against those to keep sort of some kind of tally?
Andrew's itching to answer.
Is he? Okay. Well, I couldn't feel him.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. We could. But it's very difficult to do that when most of our affordable homes are delivered by housing associations, and over which we have very little control. We could set a target, but it wouldn't be very meaningful, because through the planning process, through developers and their timescales and the lead-in time and hold-ups in construction and the difficulty of getting into a deal with a housing association, we could be delivering homes but not meet the targets because of all the things that are outside the council's control. So we could have one, but I don't think it would mean very much.
I think another way to look at it is if you're getting that information on the planning and started on site, you've then got the context, and potentially we could add pressure if it's taking a long time between planning and starting on site. And I know that the conference, not my Manchester getaway, but another conference I've been to, that's been a big issue where people have got the planning permission and then just taking so long to actually start any work.
That will be what I would be concerned about, not highlighting the target for ourselves, but highlighting the fact that it's not being delivered at this moment in time.
Sharon, I think it's very important that indicators that we have judging this council are things that we have a direct control over. where we can make a difference and improve the figures. There's no point bleating that we've missed a target because we can't do anything about it. So I think it's right.
Yes, that makes sense.
Any other comments, observations, questions? Okay, you have the recommendation in front of you, which is in 3 parts. Can we take them all together, and are they agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Item 15, guess who?
Sorry, I thought I was finished. I was going to look at the football stuff. Right, so final report from me today is about the housing service too many services, housing service plan from 2017-18. So you'll recall we had 5 overarching objectives to meet in our service plan, which gave us 17 sub-objectives. And I'm delighted to say that that very strange green looking blob means that we achieved all our objectives throughout the year. So I'm not going to go through all 17, you can have a look at those yourselves, but some of the highlights, and you'll know that these actions have come to this committee to be discussed and to take on board. So we've got our new 5-year housing strategy, we reviewed the tenancy agreement, we've developed some online forms, and we've provided homes for Syrian refugee families as well. So we've got our new service plan for 2018-19 agreed, and next time we meet I'm sure I'll be reporting on that one as well, hopefully as successfully.
Yes.
Chairman, I do think...
I was going to say, can we not get Annalisa working on Brexit?
Somebody should.
To achieve all those targets is brilliant.
From now on, you'll be known as the Green Blob.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. No, I think that is, I mean, that's just really encouraging to see that we are hitting all of them. And, you know, I was going to say hopefully it hasn't been done before, but I guess it hasn't been done before, and this is really good news. So thank you very much for everybody who's put effort into that. So the recommendation is before you, that we consider the progress, agree any observations or comments, and I think our comments are superb. Thank you very much. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay, Oxford Ridge update. Louisa.
Yes, me. I just, obviously there's a summary report in your papers, but just to quickly run through that, Site A, the site is now clear, the disconnections are completed, the tenants have moved out, hoardings erected, the demolition contractor will be on site, we commence on the 9th of July next week. They'll soft strip, taking tiles off to start with before the full demolition commences. We will have CCTV on site to monitor not only the site whilst it's going through the demolition process, but afterwards, and from a perspective of picking up some of the points that the community consultative group have made about routes to site and health and safety. So the procurement process for RG Collard was in accordance with our contract procedure rules, and we are in contract with them in readiness for start on site next week. With regard to procurement of the bill contractor, it's an ODU process, so the initial notification and quality questionnaire has been issued to contractors, interested parties. We will go through an assessment process when the tenders are, the quality questionnaire is returned, and then select a number of contractors to formally submit a tender for the contract for Site A. And that process for tender and award will be completed in October, and they're planning to start on site in early 2018, January, February time. We've today taken some aerial footage of the site in its existing position ahead of demolition, and we'll be taking footage in accordance with all requirements, guidelines and health and safety and legal requirements on a monthly basis, so we can just show the progress through right to completion and then built. and that's across the whole of Otford Ridge as well on any future site. So that's Site A. Site B is we're more or less where we were before in perspective of we have planning consent and we're waiting really for delivery of Site A before we can progress this. But the Housing Development Officer is working with planning to look at ways we can bring forward the site earlier than at that point in time. Site C, we've had mentioned because it's been part of the discussion at the Design Standards Task and Finish group, but the architects have worked up some proposals which have had pre-application advice. Members of the Task and Finish group have viewed those and provided some feedback and comments on them. We've worked with colleagues in our home choice team to look at potential requirements of tenants that are on the housing register, to look at those which may have needs for an adapted property, and the design's been made in accordance to the recommendations from the Task and Finish group. The application is due to be submitted this month, and we have a consultation event with residents ahead of that submission, which is going to be on the 18th of July. So that's our consultation that on the outline application that we'll be making. And Site D is progressing well to completion at the end of July, and we are working with the contractor to just make the final checks and measures on the houses with regard to snagging, and then the flats will follow. As it says here, the Section 278 planning permission has been withdrawn because the timing now of handover has coincided, so there's no need for that application. And the properties, we have an Otford Ridge allocation policy, and we have been working through that. There's been a couple of queries, but we've working through those, and all the houses are allocated. Flats are ground floor flats are allocated, and the first floor flats will be advertised on our Home Choice website in the next few weeks. So people not from the estate, having been through our policy, now will be offered the opportunity to occupy a flat at Otford Ridge.
These are Waverley people?
These are people from the housing register,
Yes,
which
they're
is
not
bidding for.
generally.
With those in Waverley, they're on the housing register.
Yes, but Waverley.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Yes.
So that's the next step, really, to advertise those properties so that we can then have full 100% occupancy on our new homes. From a refurbishment perspective, we have all the tenants back in their properties. There's still some outstanding snagging matters that are being addressed by TCL. And we're working at very senior level with TCL to get those snagging matters addressed. We've raised our concerns with the business owner at the highest level, and he's monitoring progress on a daily basis now. So despite the fact that we went through all the procurement process, we did all the checks and measures, there's been changes of teams on site and things that we couldn't have foreseen that have had an impact on that programme. But we will be working through with TCL the final account and looking at the contract, the JCT contract, and the terms of that, and any necessary financial adjustment that needs to be made. But we have tenants in the properties, and I'd say that the higher percentage of the snagging matters have been completed now. And we're just continuing with the tenant liaison officer to engage with tenants to make sure that they're 100% satisfied at the end. And just my Otford Ridge newsletter's gone out for June, and that was quite focused on the community and what's going on the estate. And then the next issue will have a focus on demolition and Site A and other matters. And then just the local residents drop in on the 18th of July is the final final point to raise really, and anybody's welcome to come along. Sorry about the issue of the programme. It was prepared, but unfortunately wasn't included in the papers. But it just outlines where we're at with regard to programme and how the sites link from perspective of delivery of site A and bringing forward sites B and C. And then just maps out in very high level terms the next phases of refurbishment that we're proposing to undertake after this one. So phase 2 is proposed to be an externals only, and then phase 3 will be a full refurbishment project.
Right, Councillor Fullers, you wanted to...
I just wanted to, thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to raise a couple of points that came out of the CCG. So I'm one of the members for Oxford Ridge and the Centre of Godalming. So last time I attended this committee as a guest, I did raise some of those issues about health and safety on the site, and I just want to thank Louisa for doggedly chasing up some of those issues. I'm quite content that they've been notified by officers, by residents, by me, by Councillor Bolton, and they wish to continue to endanger themselves. I think it's possibly now their concern. My only issue was that they were potentially endangering other people by leaving gates open and vehicles unattended. I believe they aren't doing that, so I'm fairly comfortable with the she issues now, as long as officers are. I wanted to raise an issue about the number. There's a few residents who are concerned about roads and traffic, and also now looking at the traffic plan, it's going to overlap with some of the private developments as well. So I have a number of residents asking if there can be some comment as to the traffic issues when those two developments start to converge, probably some point in 2020, pending planning permission of that private development. That's for later though. Yeah, I want to...
You've got 2 years to think about that one.
I've been round a lot of the new builds and also some of the refurbs, and all the ones that are, the new refurbs that are great, they look really great, and the new builds are fantastic. So the design standards that you guys have been discussing are better than that, then they really will be very good indeed. But I have been in about 30 homes on the ridge in the last 3 weeks, and so I've been reporting back to officers some of the issues. Some people were moved in late, and there were some other things that I would personally class as beyond snagging, but I think they're now in the process of being addressed. Those contractors were also a bit slow in getting back to people, and people were left waiting, but I think we're getting there, and I'm pleased you raised it to that higher level with their group. Have also noted some things that I would class as the asset management type issues that you were discussing in your report earlier, particularly with mould. I did see quite a few actually on Oxford Ridge, but some of which I gather are due for demolition, so that would resolve some of them. We're also dealing with a few level 2 complaints that are already in flight. Some of them have been dealt with, but there's a few more coming down the pipeline. Been discussing with officers about potentially rebaselining some of the communications and expectations management of some people, which thank you, Andrew, for addressing those with me.
Yes.
And very last thing was to say thank you to Adrian for giving advice on a number of matters that I raised questions with over the last couple of weeks, and to Andrew and Hugh for addressing one particular tenant's concern that was very serious, and we met with last week, and hopefully will be resolved next week. And to both of you for dealing with me, because I'm sure I've been a giant pain for the last 3 weeks. Thank you.
What's with those on there?
You can indeed, Carol.
Unanimous with one abstention.
Indeed.
Right. Any other comments, questions, councillors?
That's great news.
Yeah. No, I think this is really good news. So it wasn't actually a recommendation; it's just to receive and note the update. And I think this regular update is very useful for all of us to keep us sort of going. Okay, on to item 17, review the work programme. Yasmin.
Thank you, Chair. This is the sort of standing item in a way of the committee to look at the future work programme and to look at suggested items. As you can see on page, if I take you through, so 194, that's the list of today's agenda. So that's in section A. If you move on to page 195, these are sort of potential future items. I understand from my colleagues that the Homelessness Reduction Act 2017 would be more valuable later on in the year, so this is something we can move to November, where we have a bit more of an idea of that impact of the Homelessness Reduction Act. So that's something we can push to November. There was also, I don't know, there are a few members involved actually. For the Community Wellbeing O&S Committee, they recently completed a health inequality review. And as you won't be surprised to hear, there are a few housing elements, because obviously housing is a major factor in health. So I'd like to propose we bring an item stemming from that health inequality review. My colleague Alex Sargison took part in that review. He was the scrutiny officer behind that, so he's prepared something that I'd like to present next committee, so that'll be September. So those are suggested items. We heard from Hugh earlier about a potential item on fraud and housing fraud, so that could be another item we add to September. In terms of working groups, task and finish groups, obviously we've just come to the end of one. The potential item in what Hugh was talking about earlier about tenant aspirations in terms of home ownership, so this could be a scrutiny working group topic in the future. It's up to committee members. And there was also suggestion about the asset management strategy, that this could be something that committee members have some involvement in, whether that's just a workshop. It doesn't need to be an ongoing thing. It could be gathering information and getting members' views on it to drive that forward, add value in that respect. So I'm very welcome to hear from committee members. I'd welcome to hear from committee members on suggested items, anything they'd like to see in September or even on going forward, and any scrutiny reviews that they'd like to see. The common practice is for members to suggest them, officers to write the scope, and then perhaps we could receive that scope at the next committee meeting, just to make sure the committee's on board with that. So yes, I'll open it to committee members. Thank you.
I think the shorthand for that is that Yasmin's saying we've had a very full meeting in July and we look like having a holiday in September, and she cannot stand us on holiday. If anyone has any suggestions now, please feel free to fire them. Otherwise, besiege Yasmin with comments and we'll discuss them.
Happy to receive it by email.
Everybody happy with that?
Yes, thank you.
Okie dokie, thank you very much. Right, we now get to that time for exclusion of press and public. I'll read it out to you for the sake of the webcast before we turn it off. The pursuant to Procedure Rule 20, in accordance with Section 100A, brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, press and public be excluded from the meeting during the consideration of the following item on the grounds that it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted, or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during the item, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information as defined by another subsection of the Act. And therefore, paragraph 3, information relating to the